It is finally game week after 8 long months. Six Rotations is back, and so is college women's volleyball. Welcome back alongside Mick. I'm Daniel Gilman, as always, brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. Now, Mick, I am here locked in Bourbon Trail, Louisville, Kentucky, ready to cover all of the action, ready to watch some of these top teams in the AVCA First Serve tonight. Recording this on Tuesday, August 27th. It is a massive doubleheader, 7 o'clock Eastern, starting on ESPN2. And we've got a dandy of a doubleheader, Nebraska-Kentucky, Louisville, Wisconsin. And this episode, we are just going to be previewing our top matches on this opening week, week one of women's college volleyball. And I'll give you some fun facts, some cool stories from around the leagues that we are already hearing. Mick, we've got this premier matchup. I want to dive right into it. Which match to you jumps out more? Nebraska, Kentucky, Louisville, Wisconsin.
I think Nebraska-Kentucky because nobody knows what Kentucky's doing right now. They've been kind of quiet. And I know Skinner's teams sometimes start a little slow, but maybe Nebraska has a slow start too. You don't know. I really am looking forward to that one. The Wisconsin-Louisville match is just going to be both teams coming back loaded and just they're just going to fire. And I think that'll be fun to watch. But the intriguing thing for me is to see what Kentucky can do with Nebraska.
Yeah, let's dive right into a little bit of the details for this one and just to fill you all back in on some of these key matchups. Also, if you go to the AVCA volleyball Twitter, Instagram, also our Twitter at Six Rotations, you can catch my interviews yesterday. I talked to the coaches from all four clubs, except John Cook, because he's John Cook. Talked to players from 3 of the 4 clubs because they didn't like the practice at Nebraska, so they didn't give us access to any of the players. So when you dive into it, Brooklyn DeLay is the returning freshman All-American from a season ago for Kentucky. The matchup with her and Emma Grome, who we had on a couple years ago, she has grown so much from the freshman year now to the junior year. I just want to know where else Kentucky is going to get some offense. Lamb on the outside. I do feel like the missing piece of Rutherford, who transferred to Texas, is going to feel it because matching up with Andy Jackson in the middle, I'm not quite sure that Kentucky is going to have the firepower on defense to keep up with what Nebraska brings to the table, because you've got Merritt Beeson, you've got Krause, and what's interesting about it, and now we're going to call her, and this is an important announcement, it is no longer Becca Alec in the middle. She is now Rebecca Alec officially, goes back to her God-given name. So Rebecca Alec and Andy Jackson, that combination in the middle, Mick, is going to be lethal. I think Nebraska, watching them on practice and then having John tell me that it was a bad practice is all I need to know, because they looked pretty darn good. And to get Taylor Landfair in and probably not even start her is all you need to really hear to know how loaded Nebraska is. I'm going to go out. I think the Big Ten teams have an edge in these 2 matches here tonight. I would be surprised if there is a strong showing from the opponents, but then you see the home court does prove big, and the Bluegrass State, you have to hope that Kentucky will bring some fans, the only blue team out of the 4. Lexi Rodriguez, of course, in the back row, but Mick, keep an eye out for the 2 other DSs for Nebraska. I'm hearing word that everybody is just bustling. Obviously, Choboy in her second season is gaining more and more experience, but it's Moak, the redheaded firepower DS that everybody is very, very excited for Nebraska. If she can kind of cycle her way in, she can make some phenomenal plays. I'm curious to see if Beaven and Kentucky's back line can kind of keep up from a defensive perspective. Last year they played, Kentucky dropped the first 2 sets pretty lopsidedly. They won the third, and then Nebraska took it in Lincoln. So I'm curious to see, what do you feel like the atmosphere is going to be like here tonight in KFC Yum?
Well, the real question is, will the Louisville fans root for Kentucky against Nebraska? I think that
Good question. I think the answer is yes.
Might be a big factor. If the state kind of shakes hands and agrees to root against the opponents, it could be a really interesting match. I just think Kentucky has been kind of quiet on purpose. I think They think they know where they're going to get their kills. They haven't told us. So, it's going to be interesting to watch. And that's why it's so intriguing, but also how the fans support here is going to be intriguing. So it'll be interesting to see if Louisville shows up and helps Kentucky a little bit in this match. But I do think on paper, Nebraska looks very strong. The problem as as a coach in the past, when you have all this talent, there are only 30, 31 matches this year. And that's not enough matches for three deep in a libero spot or libero spot. So if you have to earn your spot, you have to do it in practice. So both sides of the net have to be just absolutely going at it for Nebraska to really get better, because they aren't going to do it in the matches, I don't think. And in fact, people could be looking over their shoulder.
I think Nebraska's at their best when they aren't playing a ton of six rotation players. I think that they are the most talented when they're cycling in Showboy, when you see multiple DSs like Moak come off the bench and play for a rotation or two in that back row. And of course, I'm excited to see whether Taylor Landfair will get some reps, whether they cycle her in at some point, because it's just hard to bench Krause. She is such a superstar. Obviously, you lose Launstein. She had the baby last year. Now she's geared up to be a Longhorn, and we'll talk about Texas in a minute. But you mentioned having to deal with a multitude of talent, and that's what Kelly Sheffield has in our night match. 8:30, or about 30 minutes after the first match ends, we'll have Wisconsin and Louisville. And talking to Kelly yesterday during the practices, he has an idea of who he's going to start, and it's going to be a 5-1. It's going to be the freshman, the superstar, the prodigy in Charlie Furbringer, and it's going to be a question of whether she can kind of corral all of the talent that's around her, whether Smrek will be back in the middle because you throw Devin Robinson out to the right, or maybe Devin will cycle into the middle. Will Carter Booth and CeCe Crawford have to alternate? There's just too many pieces to that puzzle with the player of the year in Sarah Franklin, who I got to talk to, and the interview was fun as well. You can check that out on socials. I just am not sure how to keep everybody happy in that situation. And then obviously you've got Gigi in the back row, and Orjo again will probably be the bro. It's too much talent, and that's not a bad thing. And so I think that unless Louisville can show up with the setter talent, I don't think this will be that close. I'm not sure that the uptick of Ellie Glock or the freshman in Caballo, which will be the two setters for Louisville, whether it's a 5-1 or a 6-2. Danny Busboom Kelly didn't quite tip her hand, but there's definitely enough hitters, right, Mick, in Louisville, with DeBeer, with Looper, with Kong, with Cressy. There are hitters there to keep up. I just am not sure that the setting is going to be at the level that we're going to see on the other side. And that's it. Are we going to see a freshman setter step up, or will there be some misconnections? And remember, no more doubles called in college volleyball. So that may be something in the back of these setters' minds that just sets them at ease just a little bit. And now, of course, you can still be called a double if it's going to go over. But on that first or second contact, if a middle is setting or something like that, you're not going to get the double call. What do you feel like the X factor is going to be in this Wisconsin-Louisville matchup?
Well, I think you hit it with Furbringer. She can set the ball. There's no problem with that. But both of these offenses have been tied to rhythm. They have to be in system, and the hitters and the setters have to feel each other. So both could be a little rough as far as just flow. And so that would be interesting. If you see them start out and both are struggling a little bit to be in system, I think that would be the key to watch. Now, Louisville, though, every time they've added a new setter, each of the last couple of years, they seem to not have trouble with rhythm or flow. They seem to be in system, and their hitters seem to be pretty good. I haven't seen Wisconsin do this before, come with just a freshman for a couple of years now. And so they're going to do that. There's going to be some people on the bench that also want to get in there and show what they can do. So I think the newness neutralizes the strengths of the teams and maybe evens out the match a little bit.
Remember, you've got a few hours left to email 6rotations@gmail.com. We've got so many guesses and predictions. I love it. I'm going to go through them all. And, whether you win or you lose, keep an ear out. Maybe you may be getting a bit of a giveaway. We're excited to kind of up our game this year and try to spread the love a little bit more as we move on from the top two teams in we'll talk Texas in a second. On to the 4 seed in the national ranking in Pitt, and this is Pitt's best preseason ranking ever under Dan Fisher or under any coach. 3 straight Final Fours. And what do they have to do, Mick? They have to fly out to Eugene, Oregon, and take on the number 10 Ducks, who is returning Mimi Collier, kind of just the one star in the lineup that comes back for Oregon. That'll be on Big Ten Network on Friday night, as well as Penn State, Tennessee, Purdue, Kansas State. But to me, it's Pitt, Oregon that I've got my eye on. It'll be on national television. And I really think that Pittsburgh is a team that can show up and kind of present themselves like it's a first serve atmosphere. That feels to me like Pitt could belong in this preseason format that we may see the AVCA moving towards in a bigger format next season, potentially. I don't know. Where do you feel like in this Pitt-Oregon matchup?
Well, I thought it would be a good matchup at Eugene, honestly. But I heard a rumor while I was in California this week that Oregon lost 4-0 to Oregon State in a match that was just to get both teams together to practice a little bit. And that doesn't sound to me like a team that's ready to go. Or we could see a real surprise in Oregon State. That's a former Pitt assistant coach running that program out there. So maybe Pitt's going to be duly. And since they played each other, you suppose Dan Fisher's on the phone to Oregon State to see what Oregon's doing, or maybe Oregon didn't show them everything because they know that that's a scouting report for Pitt. So there's a lot of intrigue here going on between everybody that's playing.
Yeah, it's an exciting one. That you're right. And I think Oregon State, I would not count them out to make a run in the West Coast Conference. Remember, Oregon State and Washington State are now going to be in the WCC this season. And let me go over some of these absurd numbers. The ACC this year, Mick, has 18 teams. I wouldn't be surprised if 12 or 11 of them get in consideration for the field of 64. The Big 12 has 15 teams. The Big 10 has 18 as well. You might see 13, 14 teams be in consideration. And then the SEC has 15 teams, and we'll add Vanderbilt next season. So we are looking at these massive Power 4 conferences now. We may even see them continue to morph as you're hearing rumors of maybe UConn will join the Big 12. Maybe they'll add more numbers into next year. But speaking of the Big 10, and one of the teams that I think is not getting a ton of credit, and of course, from a ranking perspective, they are number 7, and that's Penn State. But I think from our show last week, we got some people saying, well, you didn't talk a ton about Katie Schumacher-Cauley's squad. And, one thing that I really think is fun is Schumacher-Cauley and Steve Aird, the coach of Indiana. Those 2 coaches are going to be donating $25 for every challenge that they win to their student section, which is a really fun little thing that is like a cute little just way to keep people involved and add some twists. But they've got to travel down to Knoxville, Mick, and I think Tennessee is locked and loaded. Caroline Kerr is an absolute firepower up at the net, and Penn State, they don't get a lot of these wake-up calls early on, if I remember correctly. The last few years, I have not seen Penn State really test themselves on the road early in non-conference action. I'm excited to see this challenge early in the season for PSU.
And I'd like to see their lineup. I want to know who they're starting. I didn't see a great number of new influx players coming in on that lineup. They must feel pretty confident in the people they have in the gym. So where they put them and how they use them is going to be really what you want to watch for. So I think if you're a real fan, you don't just want to watch the games. You want to see where the coaches are putting the players, new positions, how they relate, and the real good fans know who's next to the setter and who's not. So they're all looking at these things very, very critically because they want to see what the coaches think the new lineups should be like, and can they score enough points.
Now, remember, obviously, they've got Jess Merzick back, the transfer in her second season in Happy Valley. She is someone that is getting a lot of love from the pro leagues and certainly one of those top talents. Taylor Trammell, the Purdue transfer, she's in her second season. I feel like some of these players, Cameron Haney is in her second season, a transfer out in Pennsylvania who made the move from Clemson. And then, the Stark girl, Angelina Stark, who is that 6'2" outside hitter who is extremely long and can be talented if she starts. Obviously, she kind of brings in her sister Izzy as well, which is a 6'1" setter. I'm curious, like you said, I don't want to jump to any conclusions. There's more names, Maggie Mendelson, who made the move to Penn State as well. And that's just one of those, you never know what goes on at Penn State, whether it was Russ or now it's Katie. You never can guess who's going to start when a season starts for Penn State. Meanwhile, Purdue kicks off their season on Friday against Kansas State. That could be an interesting one, but the Boilermakers are certainly heavily favored. KSU, a tough place to play. I talked about them last week in the episode, but the combination of Hudson and Chicoine certainly as good as it gets. And then Mick, you just spent a couple days at your former stomping grounds out in Los Angeles. How about USC Pepperdine? Could that be something to kind of keep an eye on for the Waves out in Malibu?
Yeah, the word is that Pepperdine is real good. I didn't get to see Pepperdine, but the WCC coaches say Pepperdine is certainly the top team, but they're all worried about Oregon State. On the other hand, USC now has pieces. They have scoring pieces, and they have the transfer from Nebraska in on the left side, which gives them now some experienced players to calm them down. They have a very good setter. They have a ton of young kids that jump out of the gym and hit the heck out of the ball. And their coaching staff is doing some new things in blocking. You'll be interested to tune in, watch USC's blocking schemes. They're more like the men's blocking schemes in the Olympics. And if you watch, they're working really hard at these. I'm interested to see if they actually give them an advantage, if they can master this just with a preseason. But they're working real hard in the gym. I saw them play USD. USD is interesting. They're young, but standard USD team, they make their plays, they hit the ball where they should, they don't panic, they stay right in there. Coaching staff's really aggressive with them right now. They might not be good to start with, good meaning first place team, but they're a team they're going to have to deal with throughout the season.
Yeah, that's another player that we didn't even mention with Nebraska. They brought in Layla Blackwell, who was the USD and Indiana transfer, just as a third middle because why not? That's just one
Yeah.
of those things. Add the talent. And then lastly, my last marquee matchup on Friday is UCLA at Georgia Tech. Do you think that the new look Bruins with Alfred's new mentality and kind of a revamped Big Ten debut starts in Atlanta, very tough place to play. Collier's crew is going to be ready to roll. Bertolino and company, we talked about them last week. I'm not sure UCLA is going to be able to wake up for it, but it could be one of those fun five setters.
Well, Alfie Reft was a libero, and he is going to be really trying to improve their passing. If they can handle the serving of Georgia Tech and run the middle, they could give Georgia Tech trouble. If they can't, I think Georgia Tech is all in on this one, simply because they have 8 returning players that have played and started, and they seem to be going to go with the veteran squad and try to penetrate some of these ACC teams that are playing new players. I think it'll be an interesting match, but UCLA has some size now, and Georgia Tech is going to have to deal with that if, like I said, if they don't serve them real tough.
All right, then we move over to Sunday and the big matchup between Texas and Wisconsin. Fox, 12:30 Eastern time. Big Fox. We're talking about FOX Fox. Turn your TVs to it, set your dials, get ready to gear up and lock in with Connor Onion and Emily Eman, and it should be a phenomenal broadcast and certainly the top of the talent level. You never know. Sometimes those FS1 games might have people who call it an overhand, remember that? But no, we've got some good broadcasters lined up for this, good friends, and I'm excited for them to kind of deliver to us what should be the marquee matchup of the weekend, Mick. And I'll sit back here, break down what you feel like are the big matchups between Texas and Wisconsin.
Well, I kind of feel from reading in the papers here locally that they're not set on a lineup yet, and that could be the difference. I think Wisconsin will be one match under their belt. They'll know what they want to do, and they'll come in. I think Texas will be feeling the water. They've got two setters. You know, Carlson's really good. The transfer from Baylor. So they got Swindle coming back, the freshman who will now be a sophomore this year. So Texas has got that situation. They've got two new middles. A freshman looks like she maybe will get to start. Singletary, though, seems to be a lock for one of the two middles. And then they got five outsides, and I'm not sure what they're going to do. Rutherford looks like she's going to get the right side job, but maybe not right away. There's some talk that they want to move the arms around a little bit. So I don't know about that. And I don't think both of those left sides necessarily are going to start from last year's team. So if he doesn't know what his lineup's going to be, he's going to move some players in and out. That's going to give Wisconsin a little bit of an advantage just because people are trying to find their way. On the other hand, I believe the Texas crowd is going to show up. And if they show up, that makes a very difficult time for Wisconsin to play in Gregory Gym. So there are a
Well,
lot of ifs and
it's in
ands.
Milwaukee, remember.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
But the Texas crowd is traveling.
Yep. But
People here,
Wisconsin will certainly have more fans, I would
yeah,
guess.
they'll have more fans, but there will be a contingent of Longhorn fans in Wisconsin, and that will be interesting to see if the fans get into it a little bit and have some fun.
Well, there's some buzz, right? They brought in Avery Carlson, the setter from Baylor. Do you see it being a 5-1 offense from Jarrett? Do you see Swindle potentially being in a competition here in the last few weeks? Is that anything that you've heard?
I haven't heard that, and they've been real good about supporting each other, both setters. So, and that's all well and good start of the season. If they lose at Wisconsin, you could see trying to get more arms in there. Because a 6-2 with those setters and the talent they have, that's pretty devastating. You have to practice. 6-2 is not difficult if you practice it every day. The rhythm for both setters, but getting both setters to like it, I'm not sure that would go. And you just don't know. Rutherford's hit out of the back row and hit in the front row. She's not going to like to come out because it's the opposites that go. But yet he's got arms where he could put, six arms out there that are pretty scary. I mean, they could get 18 or 19 kills a set. So very interesting for me to see how that goes.
And remember, this is not going to be the first match of the season for Wisconsin. That's tonight. That is going to be a chance for Sheffield to kind of work out some of the early season rust or kinks. Wisconsin had a scrimmage against Bradley that I hear did not go tremendous. But of course, Anna Smrek was unavailable. Orgel's been battling an injury. Everyone on Wisconsin, I've heard, has kind of gotten through some sort of not 100% situation here in the last few weeks. So that's an edge in the favor of Wisconsin. Wisconsin will then turn around on Monday. TBD whether we'll have a Labor Day episode out for you. And if we do, we'll dive deeper into those two Monday night matches. But if not, let's talk about it here. Stanford, Wisconsin, Texas, Minnesota. We know Stanford. Stanford's going to play Minnesota on Sunday. That's going to be a bit of a precursor. They're also going to play against Milwaukee. So that'll be an interesting chance for Hambly's crew to gear up after a disappointing end to the season last year. And Mick, they lost a lot of talent. No more Katie Baird, no more Kendall Kipp. Obviously, the injury last year to Sammy Francis was crippling, but we know Cammie Minor is going to be locked and loaded again. I think that Stanford-Wisconsin match on Monday at 5 o'clock, also on FOX, Fox, Monday, Labor Day, September 2nd. Mark your calendars at 5. That's going to be a dandy. It's tough for Wisconsin to bounce back after a big one against Texas. I think Stanford might have an edge in that. But then you throw the Minnesota one in. We're going to have just sit back Sunday and Monday and just tremendous volleyball. Also, Tennessee at Louisville on Sunday. Georgia at Florida State. Sophie Fisher is that 6'6" animal on the outside to keep an eye on. But Corey Jones, the middle for Florida State, matched up with Audrey Koenig. The Noles are going to be trouble. I'm excited for all these matchups, Mick. Anything that I said there kind of jump out to you? Which one do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm worried about Stanford scoring points. They lost two of their point scorers. You talk about SC losing Skylar Fields and 5 points per set, but Stanford's losing almost 7, 8 points per set. Who's stepping up there, and who's going to get the points for Stanford? So I'm not sure where they're going to fare in the ACC. Plus the traveling, I think it's going to be interesting. The only thing you'll see early is they're not in school until October, and a lot of coaches point that out. So they're playing free in September. They don't have to study. They don't have to do anything. So what you see is a non-studying operation that's spending all their time focusing on volleyball. That's going to be interesting. They have the advantage being a quarter school of starting late and finishing late.
Not to mention then Tuesday, Penn State, Louisville on Big Ten Network, Nebraska, SMU as the new look ACC includes SMU, Cal, and Stanford. I am so excited. There's nothing I like more than Monday and Tuesday volleyball because it just kind of gets your week into a better mood. And so I am looking forward to that. You know, we may even look into a little bit of maybe one game a week that we do a bit of an email pick'em league kind of style if this does go well, and maybe kind of pick some winners every week that does have a perfect couple matches. We'll see how it goes here tonight.
Well, do the Louisville Penn State for me. Who do you pick?
You know, I want to see Louisville tonight. I'm gonna go with Louisville. I do think that the firepower in the front, obviously, you know, no more Iko Jones, but it's an offense that has talent, and Anna DeBeer is going to be kind of like waiting for that opening, right? Claire Chaussee says goodbye. She has that phenomenal pro season. Now it's DeBeer's time. And she looked in practice yesterday like she is kind of the leader of that offense. PK Kong, who I interviewed for a couple minutes, had a great time, told me how to say her name. She told me not even to try on the podcast. So here we sit. I'm just going to say, but it's funny because she did say, if you call her PK Kong, that is redundant because the Kong is in the K and in the P, and so it's either like you call her P Kong or you call it, you know, Fekrin Kong or however you pronounce it. I don't, you know what? Let's I'm gonna pull it up right now, Mick. We're gonna go live in action and get a perfect pronunciation of how you say Kong's.
Can't we just call her Kong?
I like Kong, King Kong.
Yeah, I like Kong too.
Queen Kong is good too. Let's see if I can find my way to the pronunciation of it.
She'd be the only one named player in the whole country.
Yeah. King.
There's a K.
Here it is.
How do you say your name?
So my name is pronounced Pegron, and a lot of people actually call me PK Kong. That's like calling me like Pegron Kong Kong. I know there's a K in my first name, but yeah. So from here on out, it's either PK, Miss Kong, or Pegron Kong.
Okay,
Here first.
so we can call Miss Kong,
Miss Kong.
or Pegron Kong. I like Queen Kong. Queen Kong is fun. If she has a phenomenal match tonight, maybe I'll start murmuring that around and seeing if we can get that out. You know, it turns out the power of a Daniel Gilman nickname, and I know I didn't come up with it because obviously back in her Texas days they called her it, but during the Olympic coverage, I kind of donned the Oblaku, and then you saw Paul and Kevin and Salima kind of give a little credit and say, oh, you know, we saw the Oblaku, so let's go with that. And it was a lot of fun to kind of mess around with Paul and Kevin and Salima with that. But there you hear, we're having a little bit of fun with that. I do want to kind of wrap this one up with maybe a little bit of like a conference prediction. If you wanted to give me your top two teams from these four major conferences, and if you want to throw in a couple of the others, you can as well. I'm going to go pretty chalk on the Big Ten and say that it's going to be Nebraska and Wisconsin top two. Crazy. I do think Stanford is going to win the ACC. I'm going to go Stanford and Pitt 1-2 in the ACC. Big 12 is a little bit tougher, but I do just feel like it's so hard to get out to the Smith Fieldhouse to play at Brigham Young University. I think BYU is going to win the Big 12 conference, and I will throw Kansas as the number 2 team, and then the SEC. SEC's tough. I'm going to go ahead and say that I think Florida wins the SEC and Texas comes in second.
Wow.
I think Stuckey is loaded. She's on a revenge tour following the injury, and Kennedy Martin saw Merritt Beeson leave, steps up last year as the freshman, easily the best freshman that Florida has kind of seen in the last few years since, Beeson is up there. But I think Martin was better as a freshman than Beeson. You've got Martin and you've got DeLay as the two top sophomores in that conference. And I know maybe a chip on the shoulder for Kentucky, but those are my predictions for the top four. Let me hear yours.
You're going to get some emails, I think.
I can't wait. Hit me.
I'm okay with Nebraska and Wisconsin. I can't argue there a bit. I actually like Pitt and Louisville in the ACC. I think Stanford's third, unless they show that they can score points. I like Texas and Kentucky in the SEC, and I'm gonna predict Kansas and Arizona State in the
Arizona
in the
State.
Big
Don't
12.
sleep on that.
Yeah.
Claire
Yeah.
Jeter. Now, they did lose Levinska, which was a tough one because she wasn't set to graduate, but she went back over to Europe to kind of be with loved ones. And so I do think Arizona State is something to keep an eye on. I can't lie. I might have forgotten about it, but
If I have to sneak somebody in there, I agree with you. Kansas State may be a dark horse. So I'd look at that also.
And SEC.
SEC, Texas, and Kentucky.
All right. Well, we cannot wait. 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPN2. Lock in. We've got Eric Freed, Holly McPeak, Katie George, and Christine Williamson will be the broadcast team to bring it all together for you tonight. And then following that, Wisconsin, Louisville after the Kentucky and Nebraska battle. We've got an unbelievable lineup this week. I can't wait to chat next week. Until then, he's Mick. I'm Daniel, and this is Six Rotations.